The rain was falling in that soft, persistent way that soaks through everything eventually. I stood on the opposite side of the street, my umbrella useless against the wind, watching the scene through the steamed-up windows of a small coffee shop in the West Village. He was laughing. I hadn't heard that laugh in 18 months. It was a sound I'd trained myself to forget, the same way you learn to stop reaching for a phone that's no longer there. But seeing it now, through glass and distance and time, it hit me like a physical blow to the chest. She was pretty. Not in the sharp, curated way I'd always been, but in a softer manner. The kind of pretty that suggested she didn't spend 30 minutes analyzing her reflection before leaving the house. She wore a chunky knit sweater, the sleeves pushed up to her elbows, and her hair was pulled back in a way that showed she hadn't tried too hard. He reached across the table and touched her hand. Just a brief brush. A punctuation mark in whatever story she was telling. But I knew that touch. I'd felt it 1,000 times. It was the way Jasper connected with the world, through small, deliberate gestures that most people wouldn't even notice. I should have kept walking. That would have been the dignified thing to do. The Alara thing to do. But my feet wouldn't move. The memory hit me before I could stop it. 18 months ago, standing in my apartment, the one with the skyline view I'd worked so hard for. Jasper was there, sitting on my expensive sofa in his worn jeans and paint-stained flannel, looking completely out of place among my carefully curated life. "I love you," he'd said. Just like that. No build-up. No strategy. Just 3 words dropped into the space between us like stones into still water. I remembered the panic that closed around my throat. The way my chest tightened. Not because I didn't feel it too, but because I felt it too much. Jasper wasn't safe. He wasn't the kind of man you could keep at arm's length, the kind you could love in measured doses. He demanded everything. And worse, he made you want to give it. "I think you're confused," I'd said, my voice steady and cold. The voice I used in boardrooms when I needed to close a deal. "We've had fun. But let's not pretend this is something it isn't." He'd looked at me with those eyes that saw too much. "Alara, I know you feel this. Why are you running from it?" "I'm not running. I'm being realistic." I'd stood up, walked to my floor-to-ceiling windows, and looked out at the city I'd conquered. "You're an artist, Jasper. I'm an executive at a consulting firm. We are not building the same life. You need someone who can sit in galleries with you and talk about light and shadow. I need someone who understands quarterly projections. We are a nice story, but stories don't pay mortgages." He'd stood up too, but he didn't come closer. He never pushed. That was the thing about Jasper. He gave you space to be whatever you needed to be, even when what you needed to be was wrong. "You're scared," he'd said quietly. "I don't know of what. But I know that's what this is." I'd turned around, my armor fully intact. "I'm not scared. I'm smart. There's a difference." He'd nodded slowly, picking up his jacket. "Okay. If that's what you need to tell yourself." At the door, he'd paused. "For what it's worth, I don't believe you. And I'm going to wait. Not forever. But for now, I'm going to wait." Then he'd walked out, and I'd told myself I'd won. Back on the rainy street, 18 months later, I watched him laugh with someone else, and I finally understood what I'd actually done. I hadn't won. I'd surrendered. The rain intensified, drumming against my umbrella with renewed purpose. I should go. Every logical cell in my body screamed at me to cross the street and walk in the opposite direction. But I couldn't stop watching the way his face moved when he smiled, the crinkle at the corners of his eyes that I'd tried so hard to forget. The waitress brought them more coffee. Jasper said something that made the woman tilt her head back and laugh, and I felt something crack inside me. Not jealousy, exactly. It was worse than jealousy. It was recognition. She was getting the best version of him. The version I'd thrown away because I was too afraid to need anyone. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. Work. It was always work. I glanced at the screen, my assistant with some crisis about a client presentation, and felt a wave of exhaustion so profound it nearly buckled my knees. I'd built my entire life around being untouchable, around needing no one. I'd climbed the corporate ladder with single-minded focus, leaving relationships in my wake like discarded climbing gear. Jasper had been the first person who made me want to stop climbing, and that terrified me more than any hostile boardroom or missed quarterly target ever had. So I'd cut him loose. Cleanly. Professionally. With all the emotional precision I brought to terminating underperforming contracts. And now he was happy. That was the thought that kept me rooted to the wet sidewalk. Not that he was with someone else, but that he was happy. Genuinely, deeply happy in a way I'd never allowed myself to be. His life hadn't fallen apart without me. It had gotten better. The woman stood up, gathering her things. Jasper stood too, pulling out his wallet to pay. This was ending. They were leaving. And I was frozen in place, watching my past prepare to walk out of a coffee shop and into a future I'd never be part of. He helped her with her coat. A small gesture, but it undid me completely. I remembered those hands helping me with my coat 100 times, always so careful, so present. He was present in a way I'd never learned to be. I was always 3 steps ahead, planning the next move, calculating the next exit strategy. Jasper was the only person who'd ever made me want to stay in the moment. The bell above the coffee shop door jingled. They stepped out onto the street, laughing about something, and I turned sharply, pretending to study a storefront I couldn't even see through my blurred vision. Their footsteps passed behind me. Her voice, light and musical. His low response. The sound of their shoes on wet pavement. Then nothing. I turned slowly. They were walking away, his arm casually around her shoulder, her head tilted toward him in that unconscious way of people completely comfortable with each other. They turned the corner and disappeared. The rain kept falling. My hand, still holding the useless umbrella, trembled slightly. I'd walked away to save my dignity. I'd told myself it was strength, that I was protecting myself from eventual heartbreak, from the messiness of real emotion. I'd packaged it in the language of logic and practicality and called it wisdom. But standing there on that anonymous street, soaked through despite my umbrella, I finally admitted the truth. I hadn't walked away because I was strong. I'd walked away because I was a coward. The greatest love I'd ever known, and I'd treated it like a liability to be written off. And now he was gone. Really gone. Not waiting anymore. Not hoping anymore. Just living his life, beautifully and fully, without me in it. I started walking. Not toward anything, just away from that corner, away from the ghost of what I'd destroyed. My heels clicked against the sidewalk in an uneven rhythm that matched my heartbeat. By the time I reached my apartment, I was shivering. I stood in the lobby, dripping onto the marble floor, while the doorman looked at me with concern I didn't deserve. "Rough day, Miss Alara." I couldn't answer. Because how do you explain that the roughness had nothing to do with work, or clients, or any of the things you'd built your identity around? How do you explain that the roughness came from finally understanding, 18 months too late, that you'd made the worst mistake of your life? I just nodded and stepped into the elevator. The ride up was silent. My reflection stared back at me from the polished metal doors. Perfect hair now ruined, perfect makeup now smeared, perfect life now exposed as the hollow construction it had always been. The doors opened. I walked into my apartment, into the skyline view I'd worked so hard for, and for the first time, I didn't see success looking back at me. I saw a prison. Built by me. For me. And somewhere across the city, Jasper was laughing with someone who wasn't afraid to laugh back. I threw myself into work with renewed vigor, the way an alcoholic throws themselves into sobriety after a devastating relapse. The difference was, my addiction was acceptable. Productive, even. Nobody questions a woman who works 80-hour weeks. They call her dedicated. Ambitious. A leader. I was all of those things. I was also falling apart in slow motion. The first sign came 3 days after I saw him in the village. I was in a client presentation, walking a room full of executives through a restructuring strategy I'd spent weeks developing. My voice was steady. My slides were impeccable. I was, by all external measures, at the top of my game. Then someone in the back of the room laughed. Not loudly. Not disruptively. Just a quick, genuine burst of amusement at something a colleague had whispered. But the sound hit me like a wave of anesthesia. numbing everything except the memory of Jasper's laugh through that rain-streaked window. I stopped mid-sentence. Just stopped. The silence stretched for 3 full seconds before I found my place again and continued as if nothing had happened. Afterward, my assistant asked if I was feeling well. "I'm fine," I said, the words automatic. "Why wouldn't I be?" She hesitated, clearly debating whether to push. She'd been with me for 2 years, long enough to know that pushing a Lara March was like pushing a brick wall. "You just seemed distracted." "That's not like you." "I'm not distracted. I'm tired. There's a difference." The same words I'd said to Jasper, almost exactly. I heard the echo as they left my mouth and felt something twist in my stomach. That night, I went home and opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. I couldn't remember what the occasion was supposed to be. An anniversary of something. A promotion that had already blurred into the next promotion. It didn't matter. I drank it alone, standing at my windows, watching the city glitter below me like a promise I couldn't keep. The wine was expensive. Complex. The kind of thing Jasper would have appreciated, not for the price tag, but for the story behind it. He always wanted to know the story behind everything. Where the grapes were grown. Who harvested them. How long they'd aged. I'd found that exhausting once. Endearing, but exhausting. All that attention to detail that didn't matter. All that investment in things you couldn't quantify. Now I would have given anything to hear him talk about wine for an hour. I reached for my phone. The motion was so automatic, so deeply ingrained from 18 months of muscle memory, that I didn't even realize I was doing it until I saw his name on my screen. Still there. Still saved. I'd never deleted it. I told myself it was because I was too busy, too important to bother with administrative tasks like cleaning out my contacts. But I knew the truth. I'd kept it because deleting it would have been final. And some part of me, the part I'd spent my whole life trying to kill, needed to believe final wasn't possible. My thumb hovered over his name. 1 tap. That's all it would take. 1 tap and I could type something, anything, and he would see my name on his screen the way I was seeing his on mine. What would I even say? "I'm sorry I was too afraid to love you. I saw you with someone else and it broke me. I've spent 18 months proving I was right and I've never been more wrong about anything in my life." I put the phone down. Picked up my wine glass. Drank. The next morning, I woke up on my couch, still in yesterday's clothes, with a headache that pulsed behind my eyes like a warning. My phone was on the floor, screen cracked from where it had fallen. I didn't remember dropping it. I stared at the spiderweb of broken glass and felt something shift inside me. Not collapse. Not yet. Just shift, like the first movement of tectonic plates before an earthquake. Work became my religion again. I threw myself into it with a desperation that my colleagues mistook for passion. I took on projects no one else wanted. I volunteered for travel that would keep me away for weeks. I filled every hour of every day with something that required my complete attention, because the moments when my attention wasn't required were becoming unbearable. In airports, I watched couples say goodbye. I told myself they looked sad because they were weak, because they'd built their happiness on something as unstable as another person. I, on the other hand, was free, unattached, in control. In hotel rooms, I lay awake staring at ceilings, replaying conversations I'd never have again. 3 months passed. Then 4. I stopped counting the days since I'd seen him, but my subconscious kept counting anyway. I'd wake up some mornings with the number already in my head, like a verdict I couldn't appeal. 137 days since the rain. 162. 211. My mother called on a Sunday. I almost didn't answer. "You sound tired," she said. It was a standard opening, delivered in the same tone she'd used my entire life, part observation, part judgment. "I'm fine. Work is busy." It's always busy. That's not the same as being fine. She paused, and I could hear her deciding whether to say whatever came next. My mother and I were alike in that way. Always calculating. Always strategizing. I ran into Jasper's mother at the grocery store. My heart stopped. Actually stopped, right there in my chest, for what felt like an eternity. "Oh." I managed. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. "He's opening a gallery. Did you know? In the Arts District." She said it's his dream, finally coming together. Another pause, heavier this time. "She asked about you." "What did you tell her?" "I told her you were busy. Successful. That you don't date much because you're so focused on your career." The judgment in her voice was unmistakable now. She seemed sad to hear it. "Said Jasper always hoped you'd find your way back to each other." The words landed like stones in my chest. He'd hoped. Past tense. He'd hoped, and now he was opening a gallery and probably marrying that woman in the chunky sweater and living the life I'd been too afraid to imagine. That was a long time ago, Mom. We weren't right for each other. Weren't you? She didn't wait for an answer. "I have to go. Dinner's burning. Take care of yourself, Alara. And maybe think about what you're actually running from." She hung up before I could respond, which was probably for the best. I didn't have a response. I'd spent my whole life running from anything that might slow me down, and I'd never once stopped to ask where I was going. That night, I did something I hadn't done since the breakup. I pulled out the box. The one at the back of my closet, buried under winter clothes I never wore because winter required slowing down and I didn't do that. Inside were the things Jasper had given me. A sketch he'd done of me sleeping, captured in soft charcoal lines that made me look softer than I'd ever been. A worn copy of a poetry collection he'd loved, with his notes in the margins. A small stone he'd picked up on a beach somewhere, smoothed by years of water, that he said reminded him of how love worked, slow and persistent and eventually transformative. I'd dismissed it as sentimental. Romantic nonsense from a man who didn't understand the real world. I held the stone in my palm now, feeling its weight, its smoothness, its complete lack of concern for quarterly projections or career trajectories. It just existed, patient and present and utterly itself, just like him. I closed my hand around it and cried for the first time in years. Not the controlled, quiet tears I allowed myself after particularly brutal days. Real crying. The kind that comes from somewhere so deep you forget it exists until it surfaces. I cried for the life I'd thrown away. For the man I'd loved and destroyed. For the version of myself that might have existed if I'd been brave enough to need someone. When I finally stopped, the sun was rising. I was still on my bedroom floor, still holding the stone, still wearing yesterday's clothes. But something had changed. The shift I'd felt months ago had finally broken through the surface. I couldn't undo what I'd done. I couldn't erase the 18 months of silence, the cold words, the calculated exit. But I could stop running. I picked up my phone, the screen still cracked, and I typed his name into a search engine. The gallery had a website. Simple and beautiful, just like him. His photo was on the About page. Jasper Cole, founder and creative director. He looked older, more settled. The same warmth in his eyes, but something new too. Something that looked like peace. The opening was in 3 weeks. I stared at the date. Thought about showing up. Thought about what I would say. Thought about the woman in the sweater, and whether she'd be there, and whether I had any right to disrupt whatever happiness he'd found. I didn't have answers. For the first time in my life, I didn't have a strategy or a plan or a calculated approach. I had a stone in my pocket and a crack in my armor and the terrifying realization that some things are worth fighting for, even when you've already lost. I didn't plan to go. I told myself that 100 times in the 3 weeks leading up to it. I was just curious. Just checking. Just making sure he was okay, the way you might check on an old friend you hadn't spoken to in years. The lies we tell ourselves are always the most convincing. I arrived at 7:15, late enough to avoid the initial crowd but early enough that the evening still held possibility. The gallery was housed in a converted warehouse, all exposed brick and industrial lighting. Exactly the kind of space Jasper had always dreamed of. I stood across the street, just like I'd done at the coffee shop, watching people filter through the massive glass doors. Different street. Different season. Same coward, hiding in the shadows. Through the windows, I could see him. He was easy to spot, taller than most, moving through the crowd with that quiet grace he'd always had. He wore a dark blazer over a simple white shirt, dressed up but still unmistakably him. Still uncomfortable in formal clothes, still adjusting his collar when he thought no one was looking. I watched him greet people, shake hands, accept congratulations. He did it all with the same genuine attention he'd always given everyone, making each person feel like they were the only one in the room. She was there too. The woman from the coffee shop. She stood near the bar, talking to someone, but her eyes kept drifting to him, checking on him, supporting him, being present in exactly the way I'd never learned to be. I should have left then, turned around, walked away, gone back to my life of calculated emptiness. That would have been the smart move, the safe move, the Alara move. Instead, I crossed the street. The door opened easily. Inside, the space was warm and alive with conversation. The walls held paintings I couldn't focus on, canvases that blurred into background noise against the one image my eyes kept finding. Jasper. Always Jasper. I moved through the crowd like a ghost, unseen and unnoticed. I found a corner near the back, partially hidden by a structural column, and I watched. That's all I told myself I was doing. Just watching. But watching became cataloging. Cataloging became comparing. Comparing became the slow, devastating realization that his life without me wasn't just fine, it was thriving. The artists whose work hung on these walls respected him. I could see it in the way they sought him out, the way they listened when he spoke. He'd built something real, something meaningful, something that would exist long after tonight's champagne ran dry. I'd told him once that his art world wasn't serious, that it didn't matter the way business mattered, the way money mattered, the way power mattered. Standing in his gallery, surrounded by people whose lives he touched, I understood how wrong I'd been. This mattered more than anything I'd ever built. A woman approached him, older, clearly wealthy based on the jewelry and the confidence. She spoke to him for several minutes, and I watched his face shift from polite attention to genuine engagement. He gestured toward a painting, explaining something, and she nodded along, drawn into his world the way I'd once been drawn. When she walked away, she was smiling. He'd done that. He'd made someone's evening better just by being himself. I felt a hand on my arm and jumped. "Can I get you a glass of champagne?" A young man with a tray smiled at me, oblivious to the fact that I didn't belong here. Complimentary for opening night. I took one. Not because I wanted it, but because holding something gave my hands somewhere to be. The champagne was good. Of course it was. Jasper would never serve anything less than excellent, even when he was giving it away for free. I sipped and watched and felt something inside me crack a little more with each passing moment. He moved through the room like a planet in orbit, surrounded by people who were drawn to his gravity. And I was just debris, watching from the darkness, pretending I wasn't still caught in his pull. Then he looked up. Not at me. Not yet. But toward the back of the room, toward the corner where I stood, as if something had caught his attention without his conscious awareness. His eyes scanned the crowd, passing over faces, moving closer to where I hid. I turned away sharply, pretending to study the painting beside me. It was a landscape, all moody skies and restless water, and I stared at it like my life depended on it. Alara. His voice. After 18 months. After everything. His voice, saying my name the way he always had, like it meant something. I turned slowly. He was standing 3 feet away, and the look on his face wasn't anger or surprise or any of the things I'd prepared for. It was concern. Pure, genuine concern, like he'd seen something in my posture that worried him. Jasper. His name came out smaller than I intended. Congratulations. The gallery is beautiful. He nodded slowly, studying me with those eyes that had always seen too much. Thank you. Are you here with someone? No. I trailed off, because what could I possibly say? I just wanted to see if you were happy. I just wanted to torture myself with the life I threw away. I just couldn't stay away, even though I have no right to be here. I didn't expect to see you, he said. Not accusatory. Just stating a fact. I know. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have come. I started to move past him, toward the door, toward escape. Wait. I stopped, turned back. He was closer now, close enough that I could see the tiny lines at the corners of his eyes that hadn't been there before. Close enough that I could smell the familiar scent of him, soap and paint and something warm underneath. "Why did you come?" he asked. The honest answer would have destroyed me. Because I can't stop thinking about you. Because every day without you has been grey. Because I was a coward and I'm trying to be brave and I don't know how. "I wanted to see," I said instead. "What you built. I heard about it from my mother and I wanted to see it for myself." He nodded, but I could tell he knew I wasn't telling the whole truth. He always knew. "It's good to see you, Alara." The words were polite, kind, completely devoid of the warmth that had once lived there. "I hope you're doing well." "I'm not. I'm dying. I'm drowning. I'm lost without you." "I am," I lied. "Really well. Work is good." He smiled, and the smile was genuine but distant, the kind you give to acquaintances you run into at the grocery store. "I'm glad. You always worked so hard. I hope you're also. I hope you're happy." The word hit me like a blade. Happy. Was I happy? I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt anything except the absence of him. Before I could answer, she appeared. The woman from the coffee shop, sliding up beside him with the easy familiarity of someone who belonged there. She slipped her hand into his, and he didn't pull away. "Jasper, they need you for the toast." She looked at me then, curious but not threatened. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt." "This is Alara," Jasper said. "An old friend." Old friend. The words landed like stones. That's what I was now. An old friend. Someone from the past, acknowledged and then dismissed. "Nice to meet you," she said, and her smile was genuine. Of course it was. She had nothing to fear from me. She'd already won. "Nice to meet you too," I heard myself say. "I should go. Congratulations again, Jasper. It's really beautiful." I walked away before either of them could respond. Before I could see him look at her the way he used to look at me. Before I could completely shudder in front of a room full of strangers. The door hit my back and the October air hit my face and I kept walking, faster now, not looking back. I made it half a block before I stopped, leaning against a building, breathing in gasps. He'd moved on. Really moved on. Not in the angry, vengeful way that leaves room for reconciliation. In the peaceful, complete way that leaves no room at all. I'd spent 18 months telling myself I'd made the right choice. 18 months building walls around my mistake. 18 months believing that if I just worked hard enough, achieved enough, became enough, I wouldn't feel the absence of him. But standing on that cold street, the gallery lights glowing behind me, I finally understood. The absence wasn't going anywhere. It was permanent. It was the price of my pride. And for the first time, I wondered if I was brave enough to pay whatever it cost to get him back. That's the thing about hitting bottom. You'd think you'd know it when you feel it. But I'd been hitting bottom for 18 months, each time finding a new low I didn't know existed. So instead of walking away, instead of preserving whatever dignity I had left, I stood there on the sidewalk like a fool, my breath clouding in the October air, my legs refusing to carry me anywhere but back toward that door. The cold seeped through my coat. The city hummed around me. And I waited, not sure what for, until I saw him step outside. He was alone. He'd pulled on a jacket over his blazer, and he stood a few feet from the entrance, his back to me, his phone pressed to his ear. His voice carried in the quiet night. "I know, Mom. It went well. Really well." A pause. "No, she's not here. I mean, she was, but she left." Another pause, longer this time. "I don't know why she came. She said she wanted to see the space." I should have announced myself. Walked up to him, apologized for eavesdropping, made some excuse about still being in the area. But I was frozen, trapped by the terrible intimacy of overhearing someone when they think they're alone. "She looked tired," he said into the phone. "Thinner than I remember. Like she hasn't been sleeping." a heavy sigh that I felt in my own chest. I don't know what she wanted from me. Closure, maybe. People always want closure. Closure. Was that what I wanted? The word felt wrong, too small for the chaos inside me. I have to go. The toast is in 10 minutes. He listened for a moment, and something in his posture softened. I love you too, Mom. Tell Dad I'll call tomorrow. He ended the call and stood there, phone in hand, staring at the ground. For a long moment, he didn't move. Didn't turn. Just stood in the pool of light from the gallery entrance, and I watched his shoulders rise and fall with a breath that seemed to cost him something. Then he turned. And saw me. The moment stretched between us, elastic and unbearable. His face shifted through several expressions in rapid succession. Surprise, confusion, and then something I couldn't read at all. You're still here, he said. Not a question. I couldn't leave. The truth came out before I could stop it. I tried. I got halfway down the block and I couldn't keep walking. He studied me for a long moment, and I felt utterly exposed under that gaze. No armor. No carefully constructed persona. Just me, shivering in the cold, finally admitting what I'd spent 18 months denying. Walk with me, he said finally. He didn't wait for my answer. Just started moving down the sidewalk, his hands in his pockets, his pace slow enough that I could catch up. I did. Because for the first time in 18 months, someone was telling me where to go, and I desperately wanted to follow. We walked in silence for half a block. Then a full block. The city sounds filled the space between us, distant sirens, the rumble of the subway beneath our feet, fragments of conversation from passing strangers. I used to imagine this, he said finally. Running into you. What I would say. How I would feel. He glanced at me, then looked away. I thought I'd be angry. I thought I'd have all these things I needed to tell you, all the ways you hurt me that you never seem to notice. And now I just feel tired. He stopped walking, turned to face me. Not because of tonight. Because of then. Because I spent so long waiting for you to see me, really see me, and you never did. The words landed like blows, each one precise and devastating. I saw you, I whispered. That was the problem. I saw you too clearly. I saw how much I could love you, and it terrified me. He stared at me, and for the first time tonight, I saw something flicker behind his eyes. Not hope. Not yet. But recognition. The kind that comes when someone finally speaks a language you thought they'd never learn. I knew why you left, he said quietly. The words didn't make sense at first. They hung in the air between us, incomprehensible. What? That night, in your apartment, when you gave me that speech about being wrong for each other, about quarterly projections and art galleries. He shook his head slowly. I knew it wasn't true. I knew you were scared. I knew because I'd seen you scared before, in small ways, in moments you thought I didn't notice. The way you'd pull back after we got too close. The way you'd make a joke when things got serious. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. Couldn't do anything but stand there and let his words strip me bare. I told you I'd wait, he continued. And I did. For a year, I waited. I didn't date. I didn't move on. I just waited. Because I believed that eventually you'd realize love wasn't something to run from. That you'd come back and tell me you were sorry and we could figure out the rest together. A car passed, its headlights briefly illuminating his face. I saw the pain there, still present after all this time, and I understood that I'd done that. I'd put that pain in the eyes of the only man I'd ever loved. But you didn't come, he said. And eventually, I had to accept that waiting was just another way of hurting myself. So I stopped. I let go. I built this life, the gallery, the friendships, everything, without you in it. And somewhere along the way, I realized I wasn't waiting anymore. I was just living. The woman from the coffee shop. The gallery. The peace in his eyes. It all made sense now. He hadn't moved on to punish me. He'd moved on because staying still was killing him. I'm sorry, I said. The words felt pathetically small, but they were all I had. I'm so sorry, Jasper. I was a coward. I was so afraid of needing you that I convinced myself I didn't. I built a whole life on that lie. And I've spent every day since I saw you in that coffee shop wishing I could take it back. His eyes narrowed slightly. What coffee shop? The village. Months ago. I saw you with her, the woman from tonight. You were laughing, and she touched your hand, and I stood across the street in the rain like an idiot, watching you be happy without me. Maya, he said softly. You saw me with Maya. Is that her name? I laughed bitterly. I've imagined her 1,000 times. Wondered who she was. What she had that I didn't. Whether you loved her the way you loved me. Jasper was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different. Softer. Maya is my cousin. She helped me design the gallery. She's an architect. The world tilted. Your cousin. My mother's sister's daughter. We grew up together. She's been engaged to the same man for 3 years. They're getting married in the spring. I felt the blood drain from my face. All those months. All that jealousy, that grief, that certainty that I'd lost him to someone better. And she was his cousin. Just his cousin. Why didn't you tell me? The question came out strangled. You didn't ask. You just assumed. You saw what you expected to see. Me, moving on, happy without you. Because that's what fit your story. That's what made what you did okay. He was right. Of course he was right. I'd constructed an entire narrative to protect myself from the truth, that he hadn't replaced me, he'd just kept living. And I'd used that narrative to justify staying away, to justify not fighting, to justify every cowardly choice I'd made. You deserved better, I whispered. You said it that night in my apartment. You deserved better than to be a threat to my ego. And I didn't understand what that meant until right now. Jasper stepped closer. Close enough that I could see the conflict in his eyes, the war between everything I'd done to him and everything he'd once felt for me. Elara. My name on his lips was a question and a statement and a plea all at once. What do you want from me? Tonight. Right now. What do you actually want? The question hung between us, demanding truth I'd spent my whole life avoiding. I could have lied. Could have said I just wanted closure, wanted to apologize, wanted to ease my own guilt. Could have walked away with my dignity partially intact, another narrow escape from vulnerability. But I was done running. I want you to give me a chance to be the woman you always thought I could be. My voice broke on the words. I want to earn back even a fraction of what I threw away. I want to fight for you, Jasper. For the first time in my life, I want to fight for something that isn't a promotion or a title or a bigger apartment. I want to fight for love. For our love. For the thing I was too afraid to hold on to. His eyes glistened. Whether from anger or sadness or something else entirely, I couldn't tell. That's a beautiful speech, he said quietly. But speeches are easy. You've always been good at speeches. He was right. I had. I'd talked my way into boardrooms and out of relationships. I'd used words as weapons and shields, never as bridges. I know. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the stone, the one he'd given me, the one I'd carried every day since I pulled it from that box months ago. I held it out to him. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he took it, turning it over in his palm, running his thumb across its smooth surface like he was remembering. You kept this. I kept everything. Your sketch. Your books. Your notes in the margins. Tears finally spilled down my cheeks, hot against the cold air. I kept you in a box in my closet because I was too afraid to let you go completely. And I've carried this stone every day since I pulled it out because it's the only thing that made me feel close to you. Jasper closed his fingers around the stone. When he looked up, his eyes held something I couldn't name, too complex for simple forgiveness, too warm for simple rejection. I don't know if I can trust you, he said. I don't know if the woman who left me is really gone. I don't know if you'll wake up tomorrow and decide vulnerability is too expensive and go back to being the person who needs no one. Hope and fear warred in my chest. But I know, he continued, that I never stopped loving her. The woman who kept the stone. The woman who's standing here tonight, finally telling the truth. And maybe that makes me a fool. But I've been a fool for you before. He pressed the stone back into my palm, closing my fingers around it. One step, he said. That's all I can give you right now. One step toward me. And then we see. The gallery door opened behind him. Maya stuck her head out, calling his name. The toast. He had to go. He looked at me for one more heartbeat. Then he turned and walked back toward the light, toward the life he'd built, toward everything I'd almost lost forever. I stood on the sidewalk, the stone warm in my hand, and took my first real step. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table as the sky shifted from black to grey to pale gold, a legal pad in front of me covered in crossed-out words and false starts. I'd filled 11 pages with attempts to say what needed saying. Each one felt wrong, too formal, too emotional, too calculated, too raw. By sunrise, I understood the problem. I'd spent my entire life learning how to communicate in boardrooms, how to persuade, convince, negotiate, close. Every word I'd ever written had been strategic, designed to achieve a specific outcome. But this wasn't a negotiation. Jasper wasn't a deal to be closed. So I stopped trying to be clever. I stopped trying to find the perfect phrase, the irresistible argument, the unanswerable logic. I just wrote, Jasper. I've started this letter 11 times. 12, if you count the version I just threw away. Each time, I tried to explain myself, to make you understand why I did what I did, why I was so afraid, why I pushed you away. But explanations feel like excuses now, and you've heard enough of those. So here's the truth, stripped of everything I usually hide behind. I was raised to believe that needing someone was weakness. My father left when I was 7, and my mother built a fortress around herself and told me that was strength. She said the only person you can count on is yourself. She said love is a transaction, and you should never be the one who gives more than you get. I believed her. I built my life on that belief. I became someone who needed no one, who could walk away from anything, who kept everyone at exactly the right distance, close enough to seem human, far enough to stay safe. Then I met you. You didn't play by any rules I understood. You gave without counting cost. You loved without calculating return. You looked at me like I was enough, just as I was, not despite my flaws but including them. And that terrified me more than anything ever had. Because if you could love me that completely, it meant I could lose you that completely too. And I didn't think I could survive that. So I left first. I told myself it was strategy, wisdom, strength. But it was cowardice. Pure, simple, unforgivable cowardice. I've spent 18 months proving I was right to leave. I've worked myself to exhaustion, achieved things that should have meant something, built a life that looks perfect from the outside. And none of it matters. None of it fills the space where you used to be. I saw you with Maya that night in the village, and I thought I'd lost you forever. I thought you'd found someone better, someone braver, someone who could love you the way you deserve. And I was wrong about that too. But here's what I wasn't wrong about. You do deserve someone braver. Someone who will fight for you. Someone who won't run at the first sign of real feeling. I want to be that person. I don't know if I know how. I don't know if 18 months of wanting you is enough to undo 36 years of being afraid. But I know I want to try. I know that standing in your gallery, watching you move through the world you built, I finally understood what I've been missing. Not just you. The person I became when I was with you. The person who laughed more, felt more, lived more. The person who wasn't afraid to need someone. You said one step. That's all you could give me. So here's my step. I'm not asking you to trust me yet. I'm not asking you to forget what I did. I'm not asking for forgiveness or promises or anything you're not ready to give. I'm asking for a chance to show you, slowly, quietly, consistently, that I've changed. That I'm changing. That the woman who kept your stone in her pocket every day for months is more real than the woman who walked away. I'll wait as long as you waited for me. Longer, if that's what it takes. I'll earn back your trust one moment at a time, with no guarantee you'll ever give it. I'll fight for you the way I should have fought from the beginning. All I need is permission to try. Yours, if you'll have me. Ilara. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it, addressed an envelope to his gallery, and walked to the post office before I could talk myself out of it. The waiting began. Days passed. Then a week. I didn't hear anything, and I told myself that was fine. Expected. Even. He said 1 step, and I'd taken it. The next move was his. I kept living, kept working, kept waking up and putting one foot in front of the other. But something had shifted. The hollow feeling was still there, but now it had purpose. It was waiting instead of mourning, hoping instead of hiding. 10 days after I mailed the letter, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Ilara March. Ilara. His voice. Just my name, and my heart stopped the way it always did. Jasper. I got your letter. A pause. I read it 14 times. I laughed despite myself. That's 3 more than my legal pad drafts. I noticed you didn't mention the legal pads, or the 11 false starts. There was something in his voice, not quite warmth, but the memory of it. Like embers that might still hold heat. I didn't want you to think I was trying too hard. You were trying exactly hard enough. Another pause, longer this time. I'm at the pier. The one near the old bookshop, where we used to go. Can you come? It wasn't a reconciliation. It wasn't a declaration. It was an invitation. A chance. Give me 20 minutes. I made it in 17. He was standing at the railing, looking out at the water, his hands in the pockets of a worn coat I remembered from years ago. The pier was nearly empty, a few joggers, a mother with a stroller, the usual Tuesday afternoon quiet. I approached slowly, giving him time to hear me coming. When I was a few feet away, I stopped. 17 minutes, he said without turning. You always did hate being late. I save it for things that matter. He turned then, and I saw that he'd been crying. Not recently, his eyes were dry, but recently enough that the evidence remained. Red-rimmed, tired, vulnerable in a way I'd rarely seen from him. Your letter, he said. It's the most honest thing you've ever written me. I know. It's also the scariest. Why scary? Because I can't take it back. I can't pretend I didn't mean it. I can't hide behind strategy or logic or any of my usual walls. It's just me, on paper, asking for something I have no right to ask for. He nodded slowly, considering this. Do you remember what I said to you that night? When I told you I'd wait. Not forever, but for now. I meant it. I waited a year, Ilara. 365 days of hoping you'd call, hoping you'd show up, hoping you'd realize what I knew all along, that we were supposed to be together. His voice cracked slightly. And when you didn't, I had to learn how to stop. I had to teach myself to let go of the future I'd imagined. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Tears burned behind my eyes. Jasper, Let me finish. He held up a hand. I'm not saying this to make you feel guilty. I'm saying it because you need to understand what you're asking. You're not asking me to pick up where we left off. You're asking me to reopen something I spent a year learning to close. You're asking me to risk that pain again. I know. And I'm terrified. He said it simply, without drama. I'm terrified that you'll wake up in 6 months and decide vulnerability is too expensive again. I'm terrified that the woman who wrote that letter will disappear and the woman who left me will come back. I'm terrified of loving you and losing you all over again. I stepped closer, close enough to touch, though I didn't. Then let me be terrified with you. Let me be scared and honest and imperfect and present. Let me show up every day and prove that the letter is real. Not with speeches. With actions. With time. With whatever you'll give me. He looked at me for a long moment. The water lapped against the pier. A seagull cried somewhere overhead. The whole world held its breath. You kept the stone, he said finally. Every day. Why? Because it was the only thing that made me feel close to you. Because it reminded me that love works like water on rock, slow and persistent and eventually transformative. Because I wanted to believe I could still change. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. When he opened his hand, I saw another stone. Smooth, grey, almost identical to the one I still carried. "I kept this too," he said. "The whole time. Even after I stopped waiting, I couldn't throw it away. I told myself it was just a rock. But it wasn't. It was hope. Stupid, stubborn hope that wouldn't die no matter how hard I tried to kill it." He held out his hand, the stone resting in his palm. After a moment, I understood. I reached into my pocket, pulled out mine, and placed it next to his. 2 stones. 2 people. 18 months of pain and growth and longing and fear. 1 step, he said quietly. That's all I can give today. 1 step toward each other. And then tomorrow, if we are both still here, another step. That's all I'm asking for. He closed his fingers around both stones, then reached for my hand with his other. His touch was warm, familiar, terrifying. Everything I'd missed and everything I'd feared. We stood like that for a long time, holding hands on a pier, 2 stones pressed between our palms. No promises about forever. No declarations of undying love. Just 2 people, taking 1 step, then another, into the unknown. The sun was setting over the water, painting everything gold. And for the first time in 18 months, I wasn't running from the light. I was walking toward it.